Welcome to this edition of Jacket Sports Weekly. I'm Nicholas Callas. We had a plethora of sports happening at Waynesburg University over the weekend. The men's and women's basketball teams played, the men's and women's cross-country teams ran, and the women's volleyball team played as well. And we'll also be recapping some of those sports that have happened over the past couple weeks. But welcome Caleb Yauger here as well, the co-host of this show. And Caleb, let's just start with men's basketball. 3 of their last 4 games they've won. And they've had some standout players as well.
Yeah, absolutely. 3 of their past 4 games, they almost went 4-4, but they sadly only got 3 out of their last 4. Going all the way back to February 17th, they had a win against Franciscan, 90-71, a big win for the Yellow Jackets. The Jackets had 5 players in double figures. They had Alonzo with 17, Felberg with 21, Knotts with 14, Wilt with 13, and Matt Popek coming back with 14 points as well. Going over to the February 20th win against Bethany, their leading scorer, Travis Zinnerman, only had 12 points and 7 rebounds, and Waynesburg also held Dalton Hamrick, which is one of Bethany's key scorers, to only 5 points as well. Alonzo finished with 16 points and 9 rebounds. Knotts also finished with 16 points and 9 rebounds. Popek finished with 13 points, 3 of 4 from 3 in that game, and the team shot 81.3% from the free throw line as well. And going over to February 24th, and just to mention, on February 22nd that week, Jansen Knotts won PAC Rookie of the Week in that close loss to Chatham at home, a very heartbreaking loss for the Yellow Jackets. It was a tale of 2 halves, basically. 43-25, Waynesburg led at halftime. Alonzo had 20 points, 3 for 3 from three-point range. Waynesburg shot 53.3% from field goal range, and Chatham was 30% from field goal range. But heading into the second half, Chatham outscored Waynesburg 41-21 in that second half. 5 of 16 from 3, and the highest Waynesburg scorer was Matt Popek with only 9 points, and they shot 16.7% from the field. And going to the road win against Washington Jefferson on February 27th, this past Saturday, very big win for the Yellow Jackets. They won 61-55. Alonzo had 23 points. Listen to this, 23 points, 16 rebounds, 4 of 6 from 3, and 5 of 6 from the free throw line. He had some crucial free throws at the end of the game to ice that with those technical free throws.
Oh my gosh, yes, that game was a wonderful win for Waynesburg, and they kept it close too. I mean, they won, but it was 21-20 at halftime, so they were keeping it close. Washington and Jefferson wasn't scoring very much, and that allowed Waynesburg in the second half to break away. Just some overall statistics for you as well. Isaiah Alonzo right now, 19.5 points per game, 9 rebounds per game, and a 44% field goal percentage. And Jansen Knotts had 2 double-doubles over the past couple weeks, once against Franciscan and once against Chatham. He right now is averaging 11.2 points per game, 9.3 rebounds per game, and he's shooting 42% from the field. Just quick thoughts. Waynesburg and playoffs coming up. How are they going to do ending the season, and how do you think they're going to fare in playoffs?
Their next game is at Teal, and last year they took both games against Teal in very close games. They have a very good shot against Teal. Teal, however, has shown to compete. They only lost by 2 against Grove City, so Waynesburg's going to need to bring their best game. But heading into this playoff season, I don't think they're going to go all the way, but they definitely do have a shot to at least making a run. But don't sleep on the Yellow Jackets this next season, because they're not losing anybody going into next season.
All right, let's go to the women's team now. Right now, the Waynesburg University women's basketball team does not have a win. They've got Bethany, Teal, and Franciscan, the final 3 games on their regular season schedule. Caleb, just some struggles for them so far this season.
Yeah, struggles is the least to say about it. On February 25th, they faced Chatham at home at the Rudy Marisa Fieldhouse. 70-44 loss for the Waynesburg Yellow Jackets. Caitlin Ferdig for Chatham, she had 20 points, 5 rebounds. She had 2 threes of her own. She was the second leading scorer heading into that game, and now she's the number 1 scorer in the conference. Maddie Grenz, the graduate student, had 13 points, 8 rebounds. And Orlowski had another double-double. She's averaging a double-double in the season, 14 points, 14 rebounds in that game against Chatham. And Avery Robinson starting to show some freshman star power here in the season. 10 points, 6 rebounds for her as well in that game.
All right, let's keep moving on with the different sports. We'll go to cross country now. The men's and women's cross country teams did pretty well this weekend. Their first meet was the St. Vincent Invitational. The men finished 5 out of 10 teams, and the women finished 3 of 10 teams. Caleb, some top runners from that.
And just to mention, the women's cross-country team did not run with Aubrey Wingart, who was a national qualifier and PAC champion last season. First place team was Geneva, second place was Franciscan, and then Waynesburg women finished 3rd for the St. Vincent Invitational. They had 3 runners place in the top 20. And Allison Bryant from Franciscan finished first overall. She averaged 10 miles an hour, almost 2 minutes better than all the second place finishers.
All right, and then lastly, we'll go with the women's volleyball team. Caleb's got some information on that as well. The team's still struggling as they have in recent years.
And they started 0-2 to start the season, but they have a brand new head coach coming in this season. They had 2 losses against Geneva. Geneva was the PAC runner-up last season for volleyball. In Game 1, it was 3 straight losses. It was 25-11, 25-16, 25-12. In the second game, very close, 28-26, 27-25. Very tight third set. They won 28-26, but the last one they lost 25-17.
Well, that'll do it here. When we come back, Jared Weicker will be our analyst for the men's basketball team. He'll go over what went down over the past couple of weeks when we come back on Jacket Sports Weekly.
Piracy is a crime. If you see someone downloading copyrighted material without paying for it, then you should inform the authorities immediately. If you download any copyrighted material from the internet without paying for it, then you should go to jail.
Welcome back to Jacket Sports Weekly on WCTV. And now we're going to talk about men's basketball for Waynesburg. And here to talk about men's basketball is our insider, Jared Weicker. And Jared, we have a lot to discuss about men's basketball. 3 of their last 4 games they've gotten, almost got 4-4. But kind of recap for us what's been going on for Waynesburg.
Yeah, certainly. So going back to February 17th, Waynesburg defeated Franciscan 90-71. Waynesburg trailed Franciscan in that game 38-36 at halftime. They held Franciscan to 17 points under their season average of 88 points. Of course, as I mentioned, they only scored 71 in that game. A huge second half for Waynesburg, scoring 51 points and only giving up 33 points. And the Waynesburg defense is certainly a huge story this season. Waynesburg also out-rebounding Franciscan in that game 54-27 on defense. The next game, Bethany, they also beat the Bison 68-43, of course only allowing 43 points, huge on defense. Bethany only a 30% shooting in that game. And Bethany, 21 turnovers, 14 of them steals. And freshman Jansen Knotts, huge standout player so far this season for Waynesburg. He had 16 points in that game. Then the Chatham game. Waynesburg was up by 18 at halftime and shot over 53% in the first half. And Chatham even led 13-12 in the first half until a big 11-0 run by Waynesburg to take over. And then, of course, Waynesburg ended up being up by 20 early in the second half, but Chatham came back to win that game. They tied it up just under 4 minutes left at 61 and then took a 63-61 lead to hold on to the game for the 66-64 final. Moving on to the W&J game. Waynesburg beat the Presidents on the road, a huge win, 61-55 for Waynesburg. W&J had an early 8-0 lead, and Waynesburg tied it up at 18 with just under 4 minutes left in the first half, and Waynesburg trailed 21-20 at halftime, so very low scoring once again on the defensive side for Waynesburg in that first half. Waynesburg also up by 10 in the second half and held on despite 2 late threes by the Presidents. So really, defense really the main key for Waynesburg so far this season, and up and down in terms of closing out games for Waynesburg as well.
And Isaiah Alonso, he's averaging 20 points, 10 rebounds on the season, one of the best scorers in the PAC, averaging a double-double. And Jansen Knotts really putting up great numbers for the Waynesburg Yellow Jackets as well. How important has this front court been for Waynesburg?
Yeah, it's certainly been important. And I know in our first episode when I talked men's basketball, my main question was who will step up for the Yellow Jackets, some of these younger players, who will step up and help alleviate some of the hard work that Isaiah Alonso had to basically drag the team early in the season. Well, that player, as I mentioned before, Jansen Knotts, freshman, he's been playing a ton, about 32 minutes averaging each game. So far this season, over 11 points and 9 rebounds averaging on the year for him as well. And Knotts has had some double-doubles in games. He's been out there everywhere, especially defensively. He's arguably the best player that Waynesburg has on defense out there at any given moment. So really, Jansen Knott's really filling that role.
And going back to the loss against Chatham, basically a tale of two halves. Waynesburg having that 20-point advantage and then losing it in the end only by 2. What were some of the key factors that really contributed to Waynesburg blowing that lead?
Yeah, it was really their shooting. In the first half, I mentioned over 53%. They were 16 of 30. But in the second half, only 5 of 30 for just over 16%. I mean, Isaiah Alonso, 20 points alone in the first half, and he only added on 3 in the second half. Now, I realize 23 points, that's still a ton, but only 3 points for him in the second half. That's obviously a huge storyline. Jansen Knott's, going back to him real quick, I mean, he had a double-double in that game. He really held his own, but in terms, and obviously Isaiah Alonso with 23 points in the end, but really the shooting for the Jackets in that game was a huge letdown in the second half.
And out of these 4 games, Waynesburg getting their first 3 wins. What would you say has been the turning point, if you can specifically pinpoint maybe one game or maybe one moment for Waynesburg that's been the turning point for them to kind of get these 3 or 4 games going for them?
Yeah, I would say definitely against Bethany at home. I realize Bethany isn't quite the caliber of competition. They're not as a good team as Waynesburg early in the season, but I think a big home win like that, only giving up 43 points to the Bison. Again, I know they're not the best team, but still 43 points is 43 points. I think that's the turning point when they really realized the potential on defense, that they could hold teams down, lock them down. I mean, as I mentioned, even going back up to Franciscan, the Jackets held Franciscan under 17 points of their 88 average. So, going to hosting Bethany and defeating them, I think was a turning point. They've held Chatham to 66 points, even though that was a tough loss. But even W&J only 55 points. W&J at the top of the PAC. So Waynesburg really found their defensive identity, I think.
And Waynesburg going against Teal next. Give us a quick preview of what that's going to take.
Yeah, Waynesburg, I mean, going back even quickly to the defense, the second best in the PAC right now. Teal is middle of the pack on defense at just over 73 points allowed per game. Teal also 8th in offense at just over 70 points a game averaging. And Waynesburg dead last in scoring offensively, 67 points a game. So really, even going into this Teal game, Teal's 1-3, Waynesburg, of course, 3-4, as was mentioned. But Waynesburg, will their defense hold up against Teal and help them secure a victory against the Tomcats?
Thank you very much, Jared, for your insight on men's basketball. And when we come back, Joe Venzel will have women's basketball covered right here on Jacket Sports Weekly.
We continue here on Jacket Sports Weekly with analysis on the women's basketball team, and we have Joe Venzel here to do that for us. And Joe, an 0-6 start to the season, one of their worst starts in the last 10 years. So tell me, what is going on with the team?
Yes, this women's basketball team this season has definitely struggled throughout, obviously, most of the season. Not very good depth-wise. They don't have many star players as they did last year, especially with the seniors leaving Andrew Orlowski to make the plays that she does effectively, but she really does have no help, especially on the floor with, again, Anika Dansby, fantastic point guard, making plays for Andrea to score. Andrea in the Chatham game put up a double-double, leads the PAC in rebounds. So she's really putting on the weight, as well as Brooke Fuller down there as well at the center position, putting up double-digit numbers in the past 2 games. And, this Jacket team going to need all 5, and especially in the bench, to get an effective season going.
Well, not only are they lacking in roster depth, but they had a 12-day hiatus. Their previous game before this past week was on February the 13th against St. Vincent. So what does that do to a team, Joe, when they don't play for over a week?
The chemistry definitely diminishes, as well as, gameplay really gets worn out, especially, with these star players and the young players, Avery Robinson and Marley Wolf stepping up as well to fill those spots. You get, tired. You get tired. And especially, with not playing organized basketball on 3-day to 6-day basis, it's going to wear you out, especially as a team and especially as a student as well, because you got to focus on your athletics and your academics. And if you're putting more work into your mental health and the academics, the athletics are going to definitely drop off. But with this Jackets team, it's definitely been a struggle with the 12-day hiatus.
All right, so let's break it down first. We'll start with the game on Thursday. They lost to Chatham. So what kind of happened there with them losing by a significant margin?
Definitely the storyline coming out of that one, Caitlin Ferdig for Chatham putting up 20 points against this Jackets team. With Caitlin driving the paint and shooting outside the perimeter effectively in that game, put the Chatham Cougars on top, especially early, 35-19 going into halftime. And, they did not stop that second half as well. Andrew Orlowski, no slack on the Jackets side, putting up a double-double, 14 and 14. But, again, with the depth not there for the Jackets team, does not help against especially a top scorer like Ferdig.
Absolutely. Same kind of story for Washington and Jefferson, that game?
Definitely. With Sarah Baradelli putting up 18 points in that W&J game. And, with those two scoring that double digits, keeping the lead on, especially early in halftime, and as well not stopping against this Jacket team. Another problem with this Waynesburg University women's basketball team, they do not know how to finish a game. I'm sorry, they don't. They get to a steady lead by the other team going into halftime, and they do not finish, coming into the second half.
All right, so they have Bethany on March 2nd, Teal on March 6th, and Franciscan on March 9th to end the season. So, Joe, just tell me, what can they do to earn a win? Are they going to win a game even?
Bethany definitely will be the test to see what they will do in playoff contention. Bethany being the 7th seed, Waynesburg being the 10th seed, and especially with Teal and Franciscan, the 8 and 9 coming up as well. They can grab a win on the road at Bethany, get a momentum started, bring in those 2 final games with Teal and Franciscan. They grab a win at Bethany, go into those games with the momentum, hopefully get a stretch going into the playoffs.
All right, thank you, Joe Venzel. When we come back, Riley Holsinger will break down the women's volleyball team here on Jacket Sports Weekly. I hear. Did that sound okay?
Welcome back to Jacket Sports Weekly on WCTV, and here to talk about volleyball is our insider Riley Holsinger. And Riley, Waynesburg just coming off a doubleheader loss to Geneva on February 25th. They lost the first game, first match 3-0, and then the second match 3-1. Kind of break down those games for us.
Yeah, so obviously in the first match of the year, not having played volleyball since 2019, obviously there was going to be a ton of rust for this Waynesburg team, and they're under a first-year head coach as well, and Emily Taylor. Haley Kirby moved on last season, so Emily Taylor's taking over the helm for this Waynesburg University volleyball game, and I expected there to be a lot of rust, and Emily Taylor expected that as well. She said that there were going to be a lot of nerves heading into this matchup, and she ended up saying it after the game too. Nerves were a big part in that first game. So I kind of expected Waynesburg to not go out there and play well in the first game because of that rust. And they were playing against one of the best teams in the President's Athletic Conference from last season in Geneva. Geneva finished 12-4 last year. Waynesburg, one of the bottom-feeding teams of the PAC, in my opinion. So obviously they were going to have a little bit of a rough match out there in the first one. But in the second one, this team improved a ton. And that was big to look at that growth for this Waynesburg University volleyball team. Emily Taylor mentioned it, that she wanted to see this team come out there with more confidence and more energy, and that's exactly what they did in Game 2 for Waynesburg.
Yeah, and looking at this first game, what were some of the positives and some of the negatives that came out of that?
Yeah, so obviously the negatives, I kind of just touched on them. In the first game, the hitting percentage was just it was terrible. It was in negative value, which obviously isn't good when the hitting percentage is that bad. So that'd probably be the first big negative. And then, like I said, it was all that rust and everything. So, I mean, sometimes that could be a positive, is knocking off the rust. And it's fine to do that against a team where you're not really expected to go out there and win against. But let's move over to the positives now, because I'm a guy who likes to look at positives. I'd kind of say like that's like my personality and everything. And that second game, better hitting percentage, more aces, more assists, more blocks. So those were some of the key contributors that helped them out in the second game. And even though they lost the second game, it's still a moving point forward. This team's going to continue to get better week after week. And I mean, I kind of want to relate this to basketball real quick. Last year, first year head coach Tim Fusina, the Waynesburg basketball team started off slow. You're going to kind of witness the same things here for the volleyball team under Emily Taylor.
And that second game was extremely close with some of those scores. 28-26, 27-25. Waynesburg really put Geneva on their toes. And like we mentioned, it was the first couple games for Emily Taylor in her first season as head coach for the Waynesburg University Yellow Jackets. Some of the reactions that I got from some of the players, strongly encouraging, really believes in the team, and they felt like it was better than last year. What do you see in Emily Taylor?
Exactly kind of what those players just said right there. Everything that those players just said to you, Caleb, those are the things that I kind of see in Emily Taylor as a head coach. And there's nothing more encouraging than when you have your players back you up and your players supporting you. And that's what Emily Taylor exactly has in her volleyball team, which is tremendous to see only through one game. And obviously through that game, it wasn't good for the team score-wise. I mean, obviously the second match, they played a lot better, but it was tremendously better from match 1 to match 2. And I'm honestly looking forward to this next matchup for Waynesburg. I think it's really more of a winnable match for Waynesburg. They're playing against Chatham, 0-1 on the year. Last season, Chatham finished 4-12 overall. So obviously Waynesburg has a much better chance playing against Chatham than they did in the game against Geneva.
And, they're 20-8 all-time against Chatham. What are some of the things, real quick, what are some of the things that they need to do in order to win this match?
Yeah, get Hannah Colvin involved early on. Obviously, she is the best player of the team, and she's been the best player of the team over the past couple of seasons. Hannah Burr, she really impressed me in the first game against Geneva. So that's somebody else I look forward to. And I also look forward, not only in this game, but throughout the season, the progress of Kayla Stowen. She's been a tremendous performer for them, only through last season and through the first game this year. So that's what I'm going to be looking forward to most about this Waynesburg University volleyball team in the matchup against Chatham.
And that's going to do it for volleyball. Thank you very much, Riley. And when we come back, we're going to be talking about men's and women's cross country and their meets at St. Vincent with Matt Mansfield as the analyst right here on Jacket Sports Weekly.
We're going to fade up to camera 3 in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, take it.
We continue on Jacket Sports Weekly with both the men's and women's cross-country teams, and to analyze that, we have Matt Mansfield here in the studio. And Matt, I heard that there's some distance changes now for NCAA cross-country. You want to tell us about
Yeah, for this year, the PAC has decided to bump it down. The men's race is typically an 8K, which is about 5 miles. Women's race is a 6K, which is a tad under 4 miles. They're just doing the 5K this season. That's the typical distance you run at the high school level. So that's going to be playing into advantage for younger teams, especially freshmen this year, coming from running the 5K in high school and having to just maintain that distance this year. That'll be one of the things that to look out for, seeing some of the freshmen have more success, because the distance change can be a difficult thing to come in from running a 3.1 mile race at the high school level, jumping up, especially for the men, jumping to the 8K, a 5 mile race. So it's going to be different seeing the races be a lot shorter, but that's one of the key things to look out for, is just how these teams adapt to running a little bit shorter of a race, especially in a season that's only going to consist of 3 meets.
All right, well, let's move into now this past Saturday. Waynesburg went to the St. Vincent Invitational. We'll start with the women's team, finished 3 out of 10, even though they didn't have Aubrey Wingert and Nicole Shelton. So who are some of the standouts from this weekend that you saw?
I think one of the big things was Gigi Pugliano had a really nice race. She ran, I think it was a 20:28, so just under 20:30. She had a really strong race, and that's going to be key if this Waynesburg team is going to be able to win the conference. They're going to need someone to come along and be the number 3 runner, because Aubrey and Nicole are going to be huge for them. Obviously, Aubrey, a national qualifier. Nicole Shelton's been really consistent for this team. So what you're going to need is to bring along more people. And, Geneva's a really good team. They won this meet. They beat Waynesburg by about 20 points, 60 points for Geneva, 80 points for Waynesburg. So if Waynesburg is going to catch them, obviously they're probably going to be able to beat the 1 and 2 from Geneva. But if they can get a third person to beat that top girl from Geneva, even a fourth person, which I could see being Gigi Reed, who didn't have her best race of the season to start, but I think that she's probably going to come along as the season progresses. She's a pretty quick runner, so we're going to see if she can improve and catch up with Gigi Pugliano. You're going to have a really great 1, 2, 3, 4 for Waynesburg that should lead them to another conference title, although Geneva's going to be pushing them all season long.
So you think between Geneva and Waynesburg, who do you think right now, prediction, who could win the PAC?
I would lean towards Waynesburg just because the experience of, they're an experienced team. This is a crew that just, has won multiple conference titles. They're kind of the dynasty within the PAC right now. And I would say that if Gloria Reed can start to pick it up and get back to the paces she was hitting last season, she's probably going to be one of the X factors for this team that's going to help them, return to PAC glory and win another championship.
And now we're going to move over to men's cross country. They also went to the St. Vincent Invitational on February 27th. They placed 5th out of 10 teams. St. Vincent was number 1, Franciscan number 2. Franciscan was very good in both the men's and women's side of things. WJ at 3, Geneva at 5, and then at 4, and then Waynesburg at 5. Jack Coakley finished 10th. With a time of 17:06. Who are some of the other ones that really stepped up for the men's cross country team?
This is a young team. You had Jack Coakley was the number 1, and then you had Andrew Casper, a freshman, that was the number 2, and then you had Matt Durgan, the senior, who's been fighting for that number 1 spot on the team the past few years, and then settled into more of the 2, 3, 4 role last season. So this team was really impressive so far. I think a good start for Jack Coakley to finish in the top 10. The biggest issue I noticed with this team was from the 3 to the 4 spot, you had about a 17:30 was your third runner. Your fourth runner finished about 18:45. The gap between those times, a 17:30 to an 18:45, you're not going to be able to win a lot of meets or place highly because a lot of other teams are going to squeeze a lot of runners in between your 3 and your 4 runner. So if this team is going to have any chance to return to a top 3 finish in the PAC, what they're going to need to do is close that gap between their 3 and their 4 runner. And they have a few guys, Mac Collum and Nate Jesslin most specifically, that still have yet to run this season. They should be back for the PAC championships. Not 100% sure on that, but if this team's going to have any chance of success, they're going to have to close that gap, because if not, that's going to be very problematic as the season progresses.
And in the PAC, who are some of the top men's cross-country teams that you're going to see are going to be a big factor in the conference this year? And Franciscan having some impressive runners so far new to the conference.
Franciscan's going to be one of those teams that you're going to have to watch out for. And then I would say W&J has started to have a line of success. They're missing one of their top runners from last year this season in Damon Gall. He's not going to be around for them this year. And then you have the teams like St. Vincent has been one of the powerhouse programs in the PAC in terms of distance running. So you've got a couple of teams like that that are going to be hard to watch out for. But Waynesburg's ultimate goal this year should be to finish in that 3 to 5 range. That should be the goal for the season, especially with the lack of health and having a few guys missing. If they're the 4th or 5th place team in the PAC, that should be considered a strong season.
All right, well, thank you, Matt Mansfield. When we come back, Caleb and I will break down our top 5 athletes of this week here on Jacket Sports Weekly.
Here goes Zuzik into the end zone, almost untouched.
The middle, back out to Delaney, 3 ball. How about, yes.
Cuts up inside, into the end zone. Touchdown, Trenton Carter.
Welcome back to Jacket Sports Weekly, and we're toward the conclusion of our show. We're going to break down our top 5 athletes of this week, and we'll start with you, Caleb. Give us your top 5.
My top 5 athletes of the week, and starting at number 5 is Allison Johnson from the Waynesburg women's volleyball team. She led the Yellow Jackets in that doubleheader for both matches in digs, 17 in the first match and then 26 in the second match as well. And then at number 4, I have Andrea Orlowski averaging a double-double, and she's just been really carrying this Waynesburg team. It's been a struggle for them. They are 0-6, but Andrea Orlowski is really giving her best effort throughout this season. Number 3, Matt Popak. What a recovery story from him. him. Really giving some great minutes for the Yellow Jackets coming off the bench, but recently in an interview, he said that, coming off the bench has been better for him just to kind of see the game. And, his free throw shooting has been really good and giving Waynesburg a 74.8% free throw percentage, third in the PAC. My number 2 is Jansen Knotts. He was the PAC freshman of the week for February 22nd, and just really been contributing a lot of good minutes, a lot of good points, a lot of good down low things for the Waynesburg Jackets. And then number 1, Isaiah Alonso, averaging a double-double, one of the best scorers in the PAC, and really showing that he's one of the best players in the PAC as well.
Absolutely. Now for my top 5 at number 5, I have Matt Popek for many of the reasons that Caleb mentioned. He bounced back well. He's scored consistently in double digits over the past few games, and he's helped the men's team win 3 of their last 4 games. Andrew Orlowski at number 4. The women's team not too great over this season so far, but she's been a bright spot. She's still been putting up good performances individually, and I think she deserves that recognition. Number 3, Gianna Pugliano for being the best women's runner at the St. Vincent Invitational this past weekend, and she finished 4th overall, so that she deserves some credit, especially since the top 2 runners weren't in it. Aubrey Ringert usually always gets the attention for women's cross country, but not this past weekend. Jansen Knotts at number 2, because over the past 2 weeks, he had 2 double-doubles. The dude's only a freshman. He's a talented freshman, though. 2 double-doubles is impressive, so he's got my number 2 spot. And then at number 1, the tallest player on the men's team, Isaiah Alonso. He's just still been putting together great performances for the men's basketball team, and there's nobody else right now that I'd have at my number 1. Great guy. I know him personally, but he's also a great basketball player, and he'll get my number 1 for the week. Well, for our analysts and for our crew, I'm Nicholas Callas. Thank you for watching this edition of Jacket Sports Weekly. We'll see you again in a couple weeks here on WCTV.
This has been a production of Waynesburg Community Television.